Hello, viewers. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, English Made Easy by Teacher Ezra. We are continuing with the discussion of this text, A Doll's House, by Henrik Ibsen. Today's study will focus on the fourth episode of this text. In the fourth episode, we see Krogstad, a character by the name Krogstad, visiting Nora. What attracts my attention in this episode is the interaction of Nora with the children. It is wonderful to note that in any society that wants to entrench a given philosophical idea, a given worldview, or just any ideology, they always try to appeal to the psyche of the children, such that when the children grow up, then such an attitude is innate in them. So then it is very important for me as a literature enthusiast to really look at the kind of interaction that Nora has with her children, borrowing from the choice of gifts that she had for Bob, Iva, and Amy, that was patterning these children into masculine and feminine roles later on in future. It is important to note that Nora comments that her children look fresh and well, and she likens their cheeks to apples and roses. So that simile underscores how Nora values her children. And it will be very interesting to see the kind of sacrifice Nora makes at the end of this text. You know, you only sacrifice, we only see the magnitude of one's sacrifice when one decides to leave behind what she or he values most. It is also very important to note the statements that Nora's children makes. For example, Iva, who is a boy, says that he pulled both Bob and Amy at once. So then, uh, young boys are seeking approval that they are men enough. That is why Iva states that he pulled both Amy and Bob at once to lay credence to his masculinity. He's like telling the mother that, Mom, look here, your boy is growing horns. So men are going to be considered men based on their on carrying out masculine things, and this one starts from childhood. Bob, on the other hand, also has something to say, and he says that he has been snowballing to mean that he has also been doing something masculine. He's also trying to support his masculinity. While the future men, that is Bob and Iva, lavish and savor their masculine heroics, we see Nora telling little Han to bring Amy her sweet little baby doll. So while the future men are being considered masculine, Amy is being called a sweet little pretty doll. Nora also makes a statement by stating that dogs cannot bite her nice little dolly children, to mean that she considers her children as dolls in this house. So, you know, because the title of the text is also a doll's house, so it is also very important to note the various instances that we meet this word doll. So, as Krogstad, as Torvald considers her and looks at her as a doll, she also has her dolls, that is the children, to play around with. After the scene where Nora plays with the children in the heat of that play, which also brings her out as someone who is carefree, she is boisterous, Krogstad enters. And just the same way we saw later on, in earlier on in episode 3, Nora's unwelcoming nature towards Krogstad also comes out. She gives a stifled cry, that is in page 31, when Krogstad arrives. There is a snapshot as to the fact that we now have a glimpse as to who might have loaned Nora money to take Torvald to the south. And that one we are able to see in page 32, where Nora asks Krogstad why he is here, yet it is not the first of the month yet. Earlier on, Nora told Kristin Lind that there is something that is called paying in monthly installments and quarterly interest. So, could be it was Krogstad who loaned her the money. In the interaction with Krogstad, it is also important to note certain questions, straightforward questions that Krogstad asks Nora. And these questions are found from page 32 to page 33. We can just go over some of these 4 important questions that Nora asks Mrs. Lind. The first question, Krogstad asks Nora if it was Mrs. Lind whom he saw going down the street with Torvald when he was at the Olsen's restaurant. Question 2, he asked if Mrs. Lind has just arrived in town. Question 3, she asked if Mrs. Lind is a great friend of Nora's, to which Nora's answer to the affirmative. Question 4, Krogstad also asks if Mrs. Lind is to have an appointment in the bank. Krogstad also mentions that at a time, he knew Mrs. Lind, trying to ward off Krogstad's inquisitive nature and his insistence questions. Nora contemptuously reminds Krogstad of his subordinate role to her husband. She then goes ahead and proudly reveals to Krogstad that it was her, Nora, who pleaded Kristin Lind's case to be appointed at the bank. She says that she has influence and she used her influence and power to ensure that Mrs. Kristin Lind gets a position at the bank. Hearing this, Krogstad then sarcastically tells Nora that he expects Nora to use her influence to ensure that he keeps his subordinate position at the bank. Going forward, we get to realize, we get to get a snapshot as to the fact that could be Krogstad's meeting with Torvald seemed not to have gone as planned. It seems not to have gone as planned because Torvald himself reveals in page 36 that your husband, Torvald, is going to kick me downstairs again into the mud, to mean that Torvald is going to sack him from his job at the bank. On the same note, this comes in the wake of revelation that Krogstad was at one time guilty of indiscretion. He says that the matter never came to court. He lost all his reputation, and every way seemed to be closed to him after that. This supports Dr. Rank's claim that he is corrupt and morally deceased. Krogstad appears determined, as he states that he is prepared to tenaciously fight for his small post in the bank as if he were fighting for his life. He says that his sons are growing up, and for their sake, he must try and win back as much respect as he can in town. And the post in the bank is as the first step for him towards that. So then we get to realize that it is true to say that Krogstad is corrupt, because it is from the horse's own mouth. He confesses that at one point he was also guilty of imprudence. The matter never came to court, but he states that every way seemed closed to him after that. Nora then tells Krogstad that she cannot help him at all. Krogstad says he has means to compel her. And then that leads us to a very important revelation of the secret that will to a greater extent shape the plot of this text as we move on with the other episodes and other acts. Krogstad, using a lot of tact, then exposes to us the fraud that Nora committed. He keeps on asking questions, asking Nora questions tactfully in order to reveal the fraud that has been committed by Nora in procuring the 250 pound loan to take her husband Torvald to the south for recuperation. We get to realize that in procuring the loan, Krogstad gave to Nora a bond, and this bond was to be signed by Nora's papa, because the position of the woman in this society is that a woman is not allowed to procure a loan without the consent of the husband. We come to realize that the bond was supposedly signed by Nora's papa, who acts as a surety or a guarantor for her loan. It was supposedly signed on 2nd of October, but Krogstad gets Nora to confess that the father who supposedly signed this bond died on the 29th of September. So then it means that the bond was signed by Nora's papa 3 days after his death. And that brings a discrepancy to which Nora herself confesses. Krogstad then intends to use this to blackmail Nora. He threatens to expose this secret to Torvald, Nora's husband, and she's going to premise his argument on the fact that Nora borrowed money without a male figure's uh, consent. Nora then fears that this would lead to a disagreeable situation at their home. Her previous fear that she had that maybe her beautiful home will be no more is her only fear. Then Krogstad decides to add salt to injury when he says that this would not only lead to a disagreeable, Nora should not only fear a disagreeable situation at their home, but then he also threatens Nora that should he present that bond in court, then it will be Nora's action will be deemed illegal and he can institute a criminal case against Nora. He then looks forward to cashing in on Nora's forgery so that he can compel Nora to persuade her husband Torvald for him to keep his position at the bank. It is also interesting to note, and it is something that we could also weigh in on, the reason as to why Nora did not get to tell her papa about the loan when he was still alive. And the reason is given by Nora herself in page 40. Nora says, "It was impossible. Papa was so ill. If I had asked him for his signature, I should have had to tell him what the money was to be used for. And when he was so ill himself, I couldn't tell him that my husband's life was in danger. It was impossible." So then Nora did not get to tell her papa about the loan because her father was himself sick. So a situation where you go to your father that sign for me this bond, I am going to save my husband's life. I'm going to take my husband for treatment in the south. But as the father himself is also sick. So Nora saw that as impossible. That is an answer for you who might have wondered why Nora decided to carry out the forgery and did not go to the father. It is also important to also look at the metamorphosis of Nora. To people like Krogstad, who may see Nora as this naive woman, a woman who is insensitive, and they are just seeing Nora as kind of a static character. It is important to note that the defiance, the rebellion of Nora, which finally comes to climax this text, has been going on, just as we have seen in the earlier episodes. We are also able to see a glimpse of Nora's defiance, even here in this episode, when Nora says that she does not have influence over her husband. Then her husband Torvald, Krogstad, states that he does not think that Torvald is any more unassailable than the other husbands. It is interesting to see how Nora stands up for her husband. And at this point, where Krogstad claims to have her reputation in her hands, it is ironical to see Nora being bold and courageous, and even Krogstad himself notes that Nora, you are bold. She shows she shows uh, her boldness when she tells Krogstad that I will turn you out of this house if you speak so slightingly of my husband. Nora's boldness also comes out, though subtly, when we see we see her readily confess to the fact that she is the one who wrote her father's name on the bond. The father did not write his name on the bond, but she herself do that. Though it can seem ignorant of her, it brings out this Nora who is ready to take responsibility for what she believed was right. She has decided as a woman to draw back the boundaries of what is possible for a woman by treading the uncharted waters in this text. A woman is not allowed to go to the extent to which Nora has gone. She has decided to procure a loan without a male figure, and in this, she shows defiance to the status quo, the way of life as it has been. In again, we can see her as also criticizing, being critical of the law. In being critical of the law, Nora terms the law as foolish law. She says that she cares about the motive behind whatever she does. And she is worried. She cannot come to terms with the fact that a woman is not allowed to make a peaceful end to her husband by not involving the husband in the issue to do with procuring the loan. She also sees that there are certain laws that must just allow a wife, to save the life of a husband without involving the husband. So Nora's defiance, Nora's critical nature comes into play here. Thank you very much, viewers, for this session. Thank you for those who have subscribed to this channel. Those who have not subscribed, kindly like, subscribe, comment, and share this video. You can also drop your comments below this video. Next